Good evening. Thank you for joining this episode of Let's Talk. My name is Aranisa Page Bingham. I am your host. This is Community Connection. I am the director and founder of Community Connection. Let's Talk was a radio show that I did with WXPI. I started in 2015. And we are an award winning radio show, or earned an award for the radio show. But here today, we are with uh, our Secretary of Pardons, Brandon Flood. Our topic today is putting your pardon in the pipeline. And I'm excited that Brandon is here, and he is just amazing. When he comes on and he's talking about uh, the process of putting your pardon in the process, you're going to want to take notes and listen to this. Also, we have Carmina Taylor with us, who is the founder of Why We Can't Wait, a statewide coalition on justice, equity. And we also have Mary Saminsky, who is a member of the NAACP Black History Committee, who will come on and give us a spotlight on what's happening next weekend. So right now we will have talk with Brandon Flood, and I am just so happy that he is able to be with us today. Uh, Good evening, Brandon. How are you?
Good evening, Paige. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm just so glad you're here to talk about the need and what you for the pardons in the pipelines and what you've done for the Office of Pardons since you've arrived. If you just give a little background of your history and just share with us how important this work is that you're doing.
Sure. First and foremost, I want to thank you for extending me the invitation for convening this program today. That way, you're helping to further both Carmina and my mission, which certainly is to get the word out and ensure that more deserving Pennsylvanians are taking advantage of the executive clemency process. So let me start off with who I am, what we do, or what I do, and what we're talking about today. So, as was mentioned, my name is Brandon Flood. I serve as the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. I was appointed to this post April 1st of 2019 by our 34th Lieutenant Governor, John Fetterman. What's unique about this, about me occupying this position is I did have a public policy making background prior to taking this position, but what's even more, I think, compelling is that I also have that lived experience. I previously served 9 years collectively in the Department of Corrections and was also a recipient of a pardon myself in March of 2019, which really set the stage for me to be able to take over this agency. So that's my background in a nutshell. But let me tell you about what executive clemency is and what I do in my current role today. So executive clemency, for anyone who is watching who's not familiar with that term, executive clemency is defined as the ultimate act of mercy or forgiveness extended from the executive branch, which is the governor, to anyone that's been convicted of a crime in Pennsylvania. So think of executive clemency as mercy and forgiveness as the umbrella term. And then clemency is made up of two parts: pardons, which most of us are familiar with. Pardons allows you to get rid of your record. It is as if you were never convicted of an offense before. So pardons is one side of the coin, of the clemency coin. And then the second side of the clemency coin is commutations, which is the modification or the reduction of one sentence. So think of someone who's been condemned to death row, who wants their sentence commuted to life without parole. Think of someone who's been sentenced to life without parole, who wants their sentence commuted to life on parole. Or think of someone who may have been excessively sentenced, who wants to reduce or modify either their maximum or minimum sentence. So that's what my job is, or that's what executive clemency is. And my job as secretary is to oversee this process. So from an administrative standpoint, I serve as the chief administrator for this agency. So that extends from the processing of applications to preparation of applications for our board members, the vetting of applicants, but more importantly, driving the policy making of our agency. Part of the reason why the lieutenant governor appointed me to this post was not just because I had that lived experience, but we wanted to modernize the way that executive clemency works in Pennsylvania. executive clemency isn't a new thing. I know most folks have probably just heard of it over the last 2 years, but the Board of Pardons has been around, at least in a formalized sense, for at least 150 years. So, and a lot of their processes are very antiquated. It was a process that folks, if you weren't in the know, or if you weren't connected, or if you didn't have a ton of money, that you either didn't know of or couldn't avail yourselves of. So part of the reason why I was brought here was to modernize the system, make it more accessible, and having Carmina, join us, with this initiative through her imprint, as well as with the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus. We were very intentional about going to some of the smaller pockets across the Commonwealth to get the word out. Because obviously Philly and Pittsburgh and some of the larger metropolitan areas, they have the resources, they have the legislators and the public officials who know about this process and who have, at least over the last 2 years, have had me come and explain this process. But it was the smaller pockets, especially the more rural areas, that we wanted to get the word out. So that's what my job is, and that's what this initiative is about, putting the pardon in the pipeline. We want to make sure that we want to come directly to folks, meet them where they are, explain this process in a very clear and concise manner, but more importantly, be able to provide those one-on-one consultations so people can, not everyone is ready to put in for a pardon. So to realistically be able to assess someone's suitability and be able to kind of map out when they should put in and what's the most effective way for them to go about doing that. So that's what I do, and that's what this initiative is all about.
So if someone wanted to get the process started, what should they do first? I mean, do they contact you? Do they go to their state representative? Where do they start?
Yeah, so you can do a number of what I've recommend. You can, either one of those options would suffice. Part of my job too is educating our legislature and our respective legislators so that they know about this process, because it's their constituents who ultimately need to take advantage of this and should know that. So we're doing it's an ongoing job, and that's part of the reason why we've invited the Legislative Black Caucus to be a part of this initiative, so legislators understand it. But you can do either one of those options. You can either go to the legislator. I usually tell people, the first thing I tell people is to go to our website, which is www.bop.pa.gov, or if you have any search engine, just put in PA Board of Pardons, it's a keyword, and our website will be the first one to populate. And I will tell folks just to take a look at the website, get a sense of what the expectation is. But if nothing else, and the email is in the chat, folks can email me directly, and I can send them digitally any and all materials that they need to get started.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really a great path to start. How long have you been at doing this campaign to go across the state to offer the pardon to people or let people know about it?
Well, when I first came into this post, we were doing it a little bit sporadically upon invitation. But in terms of doing it in a formalized sense with Carmina, we started January of this year. So we already have our schedule mapped out for the remainder of the year. And the goal is to, replicate this, in the next calendar year. So at least with the pardon and put your pardon in the pipeline program, this has only been started since January of this year, but it's going to be a continuing program just because of the preliminary success that we've been able to achieve.
What has been the hardest obstacle to overcome in this process for you?
The skepticism, and I think that's part of the reason why I got appointed to this post, right? Because we oftentimes have a lot of the decision makers and the heads of agencies that create these policies and really dictate what these systems look like. But these folks usually can't empathize with the very clientele that they're servicing, right? So for me, having that empathy, going through that process, understanding some of the difficulties and the obstacles, but more importantly, allowing other people who may be thinking about putting in for a pardon to know that the person who's running the agency actually went through it. I was pardoned for 2 felony convictions involving drugs and firearms violations. So certainly I didn't just get rid of traffic tickets. I had some pretty serious stuff. So Now, if I was able to get rid of mine, certainly the average person would be able to do the same for them. So it's really the skepticism, right? And I was once, I kind of fell victim to that misconception or that notion that once a felon, always a felon. You know, I pretty at one point in time in my life, I thought that I would, bear my felony convictions for the rest of my life. It wasn't, until I started learning how the executive clemency process works that I really thought I had a chance. So I would say that if I had to pinpoint one thing, it would be the skepticism, because some folks think that how can someone ever get rid of a felony conviction, especially if you served time in imprisonment.
Well, you are proof that not only can you get rid of the felony condition, you can land in the position of helping others get rid of their felony convictions. Right. One of the things that I had a misconception of was the expungement process, and I know it's totally different. Can you explain, because a lot of people say, oh, I can't get my record expunged, but how does that play with expungement versus pardon?
Right, so it can get a little technical, but so when it comes to expungements and pardons are really not too dissimilar. Expungement is just the process. The process is just a little bit different. So with expungement, if you're eligible, you can just go directly to the courthouse, file a petition for expungement. Possibly between 3 to 6 months, you'll go before a judge, and a judge makes a decision whether to expunge your record. So while it's quick and easy, the drawback to the expungement process is who's eligible. It's very restrictive in terms of who's eligible for what I call direct expungement. So right now, currently in Pennsylvania, the only folks that are eligible for expungement are those that are 70 years of age or older, who've been crime-free for at least 10 or more years. If you've gone through the ARD program, the Accelerated Rehabilitative Disposition Program, successfully, you're eligible to get your record expunged. If you've been convicted of a summary offense that's at least 5 years or older, you're eligible. The other criteria is if you've been dead for 3 years. Some people put in for posthumous expungements to family members to preserve, the deceased legacy. And then lastly, if you receive a pardon from the governor, you're eligible for expungement. So for everyone who's not eligible for expungement, their only recourse in order to clear their record is to come before us, our board, and to apply for a pardon.
Oh, that's awesome. Yes. So I'm glad that information is out there, because and it clarifies it for me as well, as part of what Community Connection endeavored to do was to help those who needed to get their records cleared to be able to have that economic power, that they would no longer have to check the box per se. Can you tell us a little bit about, once they are pardoned, what opens up to them? I know your civil rights are restored to you, but how extensive is that?
Right, no, that's a good segue. So all your civil rights are restored. So one of the misconceptions now is that if you've been convicted of a crime that you can't vote. That is false. It used to be that way, that you couldn't vote, but I believe since 2001, now if you're released from confinement, your right to vote is immediately restored. Or if you're incarcerated under a pretrial basis, meaning you've yet to go to trial, you can also vote via absentee ballot from the actual prison. A lot of folks don't know. So the right to vote, being a convicted misdemeanor or felon, is already restored. But the civil rights that are restored if you receive a pardon is you hit the nail on the head, Paige. You can legally answer no on any question or any application that inquires about the existence of a criminal history, because the pardon is as if you've never been convicted. So you can legally answer no. You're able to enlist in the military. There's certain branches of the military that won't allow you to enlist depending upon the offense. Most felony convictions are a disqualifier. You're able to travel internationally if you get a pardon. There's some countries that won't admit you entrance into their borders, most notably Canada. If you have certain convictions, you're also able to have your firearm rights restored. That's one of the biggest things that we saw during the pandemic, It's a lot of people, and I was one of them, right? When the pandemic hit, I went and stockpiled firearms myself, right? Got my concealed carry, and a lot of people were doing the same thing because we were kind of under this doomsday notion, especially early on. And a lot of people found out when they applied for that concealed carry permit that they were ineligible to obtain that. So we had a lot of people apply for pardons strictly on the basis that they wanted to be restored their firearm right. So that's a right that's restored. The other right that's restored, and really was the reason why I personally applied for a pardon, was it allows you to lawfully run for and hold public office. Now, here I have, I've been working in at least in the government / political sphere for the last decade. And because of my convictions, I wasn't able to run for anything. And I would always invariably get that question from folks, hey, why don't you run for anything? So that was something that I wanted to be restored. And then lastly, the civil right that's restored, and one of my favorites is your ability to serve on a jury. So certainly me being someone who sat on the other side of a jury as a defendant, having that ability to sit as a juror and really serve as a juror of my peers is something that I look forward to taking advantage of if I'm called.
Yes, I read somewhere where there was like 5.8 million individuals that are convicted of a felon here in the United States, and that holds that minorities are mostly affected by this incarceration, right, or this criminal justice kind of
right. We often talk about or lament
slavery.
about the disparity when it comes to Black and brown people in law enforcement. A lot of what filters out, I mean, sometimes it does come to applicants not applying, but it also comes down to applicants that do apply that may have low-level offenses, misdemeanor convictions that really disqualify them and really blocks off or chokes off their ability to penetrate that law enforcement field. So that's another reason why I find this job to be important, because I want to see more Black and brown people be able to take advantage of a lot of these opportunities that are emerging within the law enforcement field.
We definitely need more African
American
American
education field too.
In the education field as well. Now, you just hit on one of your favorite reasons why getting your pardon as the ability to run for office. Do you have aspirations of running for an office here?
To be perfectly frank with you, before I got appointed to this post, my main objective was, this past election cycle, the primary cycle, I plan on running for mayor of Harrisburg. But obviously, being offered this job, I understood the importance. Selfishly, I still wanted to run for mayor, but but I understand the importance of where I am and the impact that can be made in this position. And more importantly, although we've been able to make some very significant strides over the last 2 years, there's still quite a few things that I want to accomplish, or at least be able to check off before I transition out of this role. So I don't have anything on my radar yet, but certainly having the ability to have that option certainly is satisfying for me.
So that's a great place to transition here. I would like to bring Carmina Taylor on, your partner in this project of putting your partners in the pipeline, just to have you guys on the screen at the same time, because I know you have another engagement. So welcome to the show, Carmina. It's so happy to see you.
Thank you, Paige.
Tell me tell us who you are and give your introduction here. I met Carmina as I was running for state representative in 2019. And when I heard her speak, I'm like, this woman is full of fire and passion for the people. And your work is, just to hear you speak humbled me in many ways. So share with us your passion for this work and how you came to do what you're doing now.
So what happened is when all the peaceful protests were going on last summer, I ended up being on a great deal of town halls across the state, and I learned about all the peaceful protests that were going around the state. And I think by the end of June, there had been about 450 protests across the state in 230 communities, and a third of them were in rural Pennsylvania, white, rural Republican counties. And I was fascinated. And I literally got in my car and I drove to those areas that I had never heard of. And I met people that I had been engaged with in the town halls, the virtual town halls. And I had a moment where I drove to Johnstown and I spent a day in the barbershop in Johnstown. I'd never been there. And I had listened to the stories of men that have lived in Johnstown all their life, young people that had just graduated from Johnstown, and some that were in school. And there was this one comment this boy made, and he said, "Listen, I'm one of the lucky ones that graduated." And I said, "What did you mean?" And he said, "A lot of my friends went to jail before they graduated." And when I started unraveling the layers of what was going on in Johnstown, I recognized that, the Black and brown community in Cambria County made 3% of the population, but 60% of the incarceration rate. And so I started learning more and more about racial disparities in rural PA. Being that I'm from the southeast region of Pennsylvania, I was just floored. And when it came down to the overrepresentation that was happening in Cambria County, I literally called Secretary Flood and I said, "Brandon, we have to do something." And he just graciously accepted. And so We Can't Wait came about from the book that Martin Luther King wrote, Why We Can't Wait. And it was talking about demanding justice. And so I believe in that process. And we started working on how we could be effective in areas that didn't have representation for justice. And this part and process really touched my heart. And as I learned more and more about stories of people that they had plights, and then I realized that everyone outside of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia aren't really connected as to what's going on in Harrisburg. And I knew that Brandon was doing excellent work, and I knew that he was reforming the office, and I knew there was opportunities for people to take advantage of this moment. And like I said, Brandon was gracious. Chairwoman Donna Bullock was receptive and was all in about partnering with us. And we've been blessed. We've been in Johnstown, Lancaster, Williamsport, Norristown, and we're coming back to Williamsport in July so Brandon can meet the people that I met. And what I have found in all of the areas that we have done this education piece and actual physical piece, there's distinct reasons why there are overrepresentation of Black and brown in the county prisons. There's distinct root causes that are in these towns as well. And so what I'm hoping to do after Brandon and I and Representative Bullock have toured the state for this first year, actually she has agreed to do somewhat like a statewide summit in January so we can assess all the anecdotal stuff beyond the research stuff and look at the outcomes of the number of people that have applied for pardons to see how we can make best of the second year of being out there putting their part in the process. So we have a large goal and we try to hit it one by one by the communities that we're reaching out to.
Oh, that is awesome. I am so happy that you're doing it. I'm inspired by the both of you for doing this work. It's like passing the baton on to those who will come after us and getting them positioned to participate in the civic process fully participate. How did you and Secretary Flood meet, and how did you cultivate that friendship on a lighter note?
Well, on a lighter note, I thrusted myself on Brandon as a professional. He had no choice but to embrace me.
Right.
I And I
I knew
want to
you was
just
going to say
publicly,
that.
I know, seriously, Brandon, I just want to publicly thank Brandon. I met him
Yeah.
before years ago when he was the executive director of the Black Caucus, and I was a parent leader at Lincoln University. And he just helped me navigate advocacy work on a parent perspective at Lincoln University in his role as executive director. And then I just kind of latched on to him, right, Brandon? I don't think he had a choice. But I want to thank him publicly for that. And so again, I didn't know anything about his background or anything else, and I didn't really care. And I was one of those people that opened up I saw on the paper that he was appointed secretary and that he had a pass, and I called him. I was like, how didn't you let me know? And he said, you weren't supposed to know. And he's absolutely right. And so I really feel like where we are today, the years of work we did before planted the seed for today, because I didn't know I was going to be doing this work. I didn't know Brandon was going to be the Secretary of Board of Pardons, but thankfully we had a relationship prior to that, and he knew my heart and my passion for advocacy, and he knew I was for real about this. And, I don't have a personal testimony about someone that's been incarcerated. I don't have that in my immediate family. I don't know anyone in my immediate circle that has been incarcerated. But when you hear what people have gone through, because what they're saying to me is, I served my time, but now I'm out of jail. I have restored my life. I want to move on, and I can't. And interesting, Paige, I was in Williamsport, and there's a phenomenon about that in the sense that the majority of the people that are Black that are not from Williamsport, and I know Brandon has to leave, so thank you, Brandon. Did you hear me give you all the kudos, Brandon, and acknowledge you, told you that you had no choice but to love me?
I was being too quiet. The producer asked whether my camera was frozen. So I concur with 95% of everything you said, except that no, we always have a choice, but it was the smart choice to make by indulging you.
Oh, that's awesome. That's what I was going to ask Brandon to come back on to respond.
Well, it looked like you were frozen, Brandon. I didn't know what was going on.
I was taking it all in. That's why,
Well, honestly, Brandon, you got 30 seconds, and I just need to publicly acknowledge you as well, and just your receptiveness. And let me say, I am all about his office. I think this work is going to demonstrate that the pardoning office needs more staff and more funding and resources so we can be more of a public service and right the wrongs that have happened in this Black and brown community. So selfishly, I'm going to advocate for his office to get more resources to help more people in Pennsylvania. So thank you, Brandon, for your work.
And I appreciate it. And if I can, let's leave some final remarks, at least on my end. So for all of your viewers, so it's one thing for us to tell you about this process, to tell you about, the initiative that we have about getting the word out. But it's also important to remember too, this is a free process.
Absolutely.
So apply for a pardon in Pennsylvania is a free process. That's one of the reforms that both Lieutenant Governor and myself have instituted. But beyond that, it's about accessibility. So we're constantly trying to make this process more efficient. That's why I say go to our website. We literally have video tutorials that show you how to navigate this process. We've overhauled the application to simplify it so that non-lawyers can avail themselves, can navigate this process. Paige, you had a question?
I have a question, if I can get one in edgewise. What do you need from the public, the leaders in the community? What do you need from us in order to make this process a little easier for you?
Well, as Carmina said, obviously advocacy is key, but also part of what is, in addition to advocacy, is getting people to apply, right? So it's one thing for me to go to the legislature and say, hey, I need 10 more staff, and the numbers don't bear out that I do. It's another for me to be able, which I can say today, that there's been a 400% increase in the number of applications that's been received since 2019. So for our so that's the key. Number one, advocating on our behalf, especially when it comes to the budget and ensuring that we're properly funded. But more importantly, getting your family members, friends, loved ones to apply because we want those numbers to go up. A question was asked earlier, how many people received a pardon last year? So we had about 700 people apply, got public hearings, but only about 458 of them were the governor signed off on. So last year, so let me give some more context in terms of how much the numbers have increased. So in 2019, prior to 2019, we've never received, that means applications coming in. We never received more than about 590 applications. In 2019, we finished the year with 1,100 applications. And then in 2020, despite a pandemic, we closed the year off with more than 2,100 applications in one calendar year. So that number is going to only trend upward. So the key is for us, again, to reemphasize, get people to apply and advocate for more funding so that we can ensure that more deserving Pennsylvanians can apply. Because in an ideal world, we talk about mass incarceration and reversing the effects of mass incarceration. One way to do that is by restoring people's rights and allowing them to be able to flourish and move on with their lives. So there should be 10,000 people applying each year. But we need the capacity to be able to handle that workload and be able to process and schedule those applicants in an efficient manner. So that's what you can do, and that's what your viewers can do as well.
There's a lot of information that needs to be disseminated. I want to extend you the invitation to come back again. I know you're coming back here. You're coming to Williamsport in July. Maybe we can come back and revisit this prior to you coming.
At your leisure, Paige, whenever you deem it appropriate, as long as you give me, a little bit of notice, and I'll gladly come back as many times as you need me to. Carmina, same deal.
Thank you so much, Brandon. We really appreciate your time here today. And if you have to leave, then Godspeed.
All right, thank you, and likewise. You're in good hands with Carmina.
Oh yes. She's inspirational and very inspiring. So I'm just so happy that I met her. I mean, it's that passion that we need is contagious. And
right.
Now I found someone who works just as hard and has the same passion level as I do. May not show it may not come across in my voice, but in my heart, I need her. So
that's where it matters most.
Yes, we need to have this coalition. We need to have this community, the sense of community to get this work done.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Brandy, for joining us. I'm going to continue with Carmina here for a little bit, and then we'll hear from Mary, our historian for Williamsport, Pennsylvania. So Carmina.
Yes.
How are you? How excited are you to come back to Williamsport? Well,
I am. I kind of wanted to finish what I found out because this is what's so important. Let me tell you what happened. So I went initially with the Lycoming Tri-County NAACP to offer an opportunity to help people put their paperwork together in preparation for July. And so here's the phenomenon that I found, or the distinct difference in Williamsport. There's a lot of Black people, brown and Black people that moved to Williamsport years ago, leaving Philadelphia, leaving their addiction life, and in Williamsport, and came to live a life of recovery. And I met a gentleman that had, he's been here for over 30 years, and he has worked various jobs, and he was offered a job for a CNA somewhere in Williamsport, and he couldn't get the job. And he couldn't get the job because he had a record from 1979. And has been unable to, has not ever sought a pardon because he really didn't think that was a possibility for him. So when he found out what we were doing, he almost cried because he said, I've reformed my whole life, and my record and the records from 1979 in Philadelphia aren't even electronic. They're in a storage area. And so to scour through that, and you have to go through a separate process in Philadelphia, to my understanding, to get these hard copies that you would need to actually apply for the pardon. Those are the kind of stories that you really say to yourself, wow, this is really important, right? So this man is over 50 some years old, and he can't get a job as a CNA in Williamstown for something he did almost 40 years ago. That's
Yes.
outrageous. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's really outrageous. So, I'm so glad that Brandon emphasized that the application is free. He's made it more efficient. They're trying to modernize the process where eventually you can actually not have to apply and through the mail, but electronically. But I think he said he only has 4 people working in his office. I mean,
Okay.
come on. So at the end of the day, this is a journey. It's a marathon, and I'm blessed that God, to me, Paige, to be honest with you, all of this advocacy work, I believe is directed by God. I'm just a vessel. I'm a vessel. And
Oh, I agree. I agree.
I firmly believe that. And it's a blessing. It's a privilege. I'm humbled because every time I hear of a story and then I'm in front of them and I had no history about that, and I taught myself how to put the packets together, and then I met people that you connected me with in Williamsport, and it's all coming together. And I think it's coming together. I know that it's coming together for the greater good, and that's why I do the work. And but the We Can't Wait Coalition is just been, I've been really busy, Paige, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
There's just so much going on. I mean, I'm dealing with.
I'm just grateful you take my phone call when I call.
Stop that, please, Paige.
I feel honored.
Listen. I try. I'm up late. But we're dealing with a lot. There's a lot of other racial injustices that are happening across the state as well. So I'm doing some work in Johnstown related to their educational systems. I'm dealing with Uniontown with some racial disparity issues in their educational system, but also with their city government, elected officials there. Williamsport has some issues related to healthcare. Not Williamsport, Lancaster. Norristown has an excessive overrepresentation of incarceration rates at the juvenile level as well as the adult. So I partner up with local community groups or community leaders in the area. They ask me to come and I advocate, and I'm blessed.
Well, you're the talker, and meaning that you're able to bring the information concisely to the people. I struggle with communicating verbally, but writing I can do. I stand here or sit here today saying that I would consider myself a part of your coalition.
Absolutely.
And if there is a process to make that formalized, or just by word of mouth here on national Facebook.
Absolutely. No, you are definitely a partner, Paige, because if I were to just bring it back to you, you inspired me when you ran for office, and that's why I wanted to do whatever I could to make your campaign thrive, because I felt as a Black woman in Lycoming County running for a state office, that you deserved the utmost attention, respect, and support that anybody else did. Even more so because there's so many kinds of tags with being a Black woman in Pennsylvania, in a rural county, and the courage and fortitude that it takes to run for state office, because that's not my intention at all. I used to be a congressional staffer over 20 years ago. I know what that type of life is. I already am busy doing civic work and consulting work, but I will always support you or anyone else that wants to run for office in this state, because you need support. You cannot do it alone. And I'm an advocate, true and true. So I admire you.
Well, I thank you for those accolades, but part of community connection is to increase civic engagement in the
Yes.
community. And that's one of the reasons why we have the NAACP here in Williamsport today, with some excellent leaders in that organization that are in place. And I'm a firm believer that you have to practice what you preach.
Absolutely.
So I ran for office. I currently sit on the school board in South Williamsport, but that's all because we need a seat at the table.
Absolutely.
We as people of color need a seat at the table, and diligently help make the decisions and be a part of the process. So thank you for that. I won't hold you up any longer.
Okay.
I could sit here and talk to you all day.
I know,
But I want to
but I
bring
do want
Mary
to
on
listen
to
to
talk
Mary. Can
about
I
what we're
stay
doing
on?
here. June 19th. Are you coming?
I
Or
am.
you have
Yes, I'm gonna be in. Sorry, hold on. I'm gonna be in
June 19th
Wilkesburg.
is the
Yep, I'm
night
gonna be
before.
in. I'm gonna be
June
in.
19th, Juneteenth.
Right, I'm gonna be in Wilkes-Barre first, and then come to Williamsport. Yeah.
Okay,
No, no,
let's
no,
bring
no.
Mary on.
Yes, but can I
Hi,
listen
Mary.
to Mary? Can I listen to Mary?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You can stay on and ask questions as well.
Now I'm
Mary.
curious. Go ahead, Mary. I'm sorry.
Hi, hi, Paige. Hi, Carmina. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Juneteenth in Williamsport. It's has an awesome title, celebrating who we are, which I think is great. It's not. Although I'm on the Black History Committee, it's not all about looking back at the past. It's looking about celebrating who
Yay.
Black and brown people and all people are right now in Williamsport. Um, the main event will be it's on at Branton Park. It's on Saturday, June 19th, and at Brandon Park, which is in central Williamsport. There will it will be people will be there from 10:30 until 5. The day actually starts with a march from Freedom Road, which was the place where many African Americans lived in the 19th century, early from the 19th century, and not so much and into the 20th century. And there's a cemetery there. It's called the Freedom Road Cemetery, where a lot of Blacks are buried. There was a period of time where cemeteries where Blacks were buried in a separate cemetery than whites. It's not the case anymore and hasn't been for 100 and so years. But also in this cemetery are Blacks who fought for the Union in the Civil War. So they were fighting for their own freedom. And there's almost a dozen veterans of that war who are buried in that cemetery, so that the day starts there at 9 o'clock, and with a march to Brandon Park, and then a prayer and a talk from the Williamsport, the mayor of Williamsport, who is himself Black brown. And so at Brandon Park itself, there will be events all day long. There will be a main speech by, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this. Mayor Slaughter will be there, and Adrian Miller, the author of the Soul Food Scholar, will be there talking about soul food and its influence on American culture in general. So that is again Adrian Miller. And in the afternoon, there'll be performances, there'll be music, there'll be dance, there'll be food trucks. So it's a day-long celebration. It's an opportunity for everyone to visibly show your support for the very active, and we hope more active, African American community in, as you said, Carmina, this rural area in Pennsylvania. Although I'm again on the Black History Committee, and we will have some scholars, local scholars, experts in African American history. And we know that there were African Americans in Williamsport from its founding, and we have active African Americans in the community and also in the Underground Railroad. So there's really a rich history, which is very little known about African Americans' contributions to the community. So that the table that I will have there will be some photographs, some displays from African American history. The sign from a boarding house that in Williamsport that was cited in the Green Book. I don't know if you saw that, how many listeners saw the Green Book, where Williamsport had its own green entries in the Green Book. And we will have some sign there. We also celebrate a Williamsport author. Her name is Julia Collins, and we will have material there about her. Talk about passion. I have a passion for her. She wrote what is considered the first novel published by an African American woman. And she was at that point a school teacher in Williamsport for the Black teacher, because schools were not, there wasn't even a school for the Black people. She taught in her own, probably in the church. While her husband was in the Civil War fighting, she was writing a novel that had in a national publication. And there is a historical marker in Williamsport for her, the only historical marker for both a woman, let alone a Black woman. And we'll have a replica of that marker there and some information on her. So again, I'm excited about this. I've been to Juneteenth celebrations in Williamsport for over 20 years, and I can't wait for this one, particularly the emphasis on celebrating who we are.
Celebrating who we are.
So
thank you for that, Mary. We really appreciate all of that information. And I just want to let everyone know, my listeners, that Community Connection has an educational banner as well. And Mary is a historian. She was a librarian, and I'm following her. She is my Black history teacher right now, and because I didn't get Black history in school, not to any extent. I mean, I studied American history, and the traditional handful of Blacks were mentioned. But this rich history that Mary is sharing and imparting with us, I want everyone to know it, and that's important, so that we know where we come from and where we are now and where we need to get to. So I invite all of you to join me on this journey of learning Black history. We take educational trips. One of the things we're putting in the plans is to go and visit Harriet Tubman's home my husband just gave me the location and I can't remember it now, but contact me at Community Connection at groupmail.com for more information on that. But Carmina, do you have any questions for Mary on the information she shared with us?
Well, Mary, it was just so wonderful listening to it from your perspective. Melody Carter Shaw took me to that grave site. She took me to the place where you're starting off the walk, and she took me to Brandon Park, because at that time I didn't think I was coming. And I went down Millionaires Row or Billionaires Row, or again, being from the Southeast, not knowing, I mean, I had heard Williamsport with that whole Little League thing, but just knowing your rich history beyond that. And so, no, I want to thank you. You made it even more exciting. I'm going to just try to be in 2 different places that are an hour away throughout the day. And so I can't wait to meet you, Mary.
Well, I think that's how Black Scranton got started,
Oh, really?
by learning their history and saying, yes, I'm proud to be from.
Absolutely. And I think what's really important, Mary, and I'm going to tell Melody after this, there's a lot of Juneteenth events this year. And I guess, part of it is what we went and experienced last year, but we need to push that out further after this, because a lot of people that are not from rural Pennsylvania don't know the history and the Black history of rural Pennsylvania. And that to me makes you guys significant stakeholders in this state. And that's the whole emphasis of the coalition, the state, my group, is because we've got to forge relationships that our leadership in the State House take us seriously and acknowledge us. All your elected officials, state and local. So thank you, Mary, for just making it more clear that I'm going to have to be a Williamsport, Wilkes-Barre resident next weekend.
Well, we will
Absolutely.
have a table. I'm going to move away. See if
I just want to mention too that Melanie Carter Shaw is our president of the local Lycoming Tri-County NAACP, and
Love
she
it.
is phenomenal. She is
She
just
is.
doing a fantastic job in leadership for this organization. It's been a long time coming. The unit prior to stopped activity in 2009. And then in 2016, 17, my group Onyx 2X was asked to resurrect the NAACP because that was one of the avenues of reaching our children and bringing our community together. So hence we are here with Community Connection. So Mary, you have something else for us?
Well, we have a table with proud of my Black heritage.
Oh yes, that was the
And
program.
so we're encouraging particularly young people to get some family stories so that they can know where they came from, know their family stories. Maybe next year there'll be a booth so that people like the man you met who can't get a job can tell their stories, and that's what
Yes.
and make those. So
Awesome.
Absolutely.
that's
We
so
are coming.
Thank you very much for having me on. So.
Oh yes, Mary, you are so welcome, and I thank you for being here. Carmina, I thank you for being here as well. It has been a pleasure. I do want to point out that I think you make a great co-host. I know you're busy. I'm throwing it out to you right now to be a co-host on Community Connection, because I think we need this platform in order to tell our stories, in order to tell it the way from our point of view.
Sure.
So you think about it, and anyone else out there who's studying journalism and would like to be a part of Community Connection, let's talk. Again, just email me at communityconnection@groupmail.com.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
ladies,
having
for
me.
joining me. Next week, we are going to have a special show with Adrian Miller, our keynote speaker for Juneteenth. He is the author of several books, Black Smoke. So join me then for an interview with a renowned historian of Black cooking and how that brings our community together. Thank you for joining me. My name is Erenisa Page Bingham, and I'm the host of Let's Talk. Thanks for talking with me.